Okay, wonderful. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for coming to listen as well. My name's Tom. I'm a teacher and a teacher trainer working in Istanbul, ITI Istanbul. And I'm interested in bodies. I've always been interested in the relationship between the mind, the body, and our emotions, our feelings, because I think teaching and learning is a holistic process. But what I'm kind of worried about is that teacher training and teacher education sometimes is missing the point. Because when I talk to teachers or observe teachers, the part of teaching that they find the most complicated or difficult or challenging is very often about the performance, what they do in the classroom. So the behavior of the learners. So how can they get the learners' trust? How can they get the learners to behave creatively, spontaneously, get the learners to work together, listen to each other, speak to each other, interact with each other, get the learners' confidence, help the learners do the tasks, get the learners to solve problems, the atmosphere in the classroom, getting action, activity, and building a learning community. These are the challenges for teachers. These are what teachers need to learn how to do. But very often on teacher training courses, the focus is kind of much more on the knowledge of how to teach. So it's more focused on the competence or what the teachers, a procedure, if you like, for what teachers need to do. So a typical training course would have, how do you plan a lesson? How do you use the resources? How do you set up activities, give and check instructions, give feedback, analyze? And all of it sounds as if it's kind of a recipe, that there is a formula. But obviously we know that there isn't a formula. Every lesson is different. Every lesson and every learner is different. So I've kind of been worried that teacher training and teacher education is not really focusing on what teachers need. And then something very interesting happened. We had the COVID pandemic and everything went online. And I thought, wow, that's not going to work, because teaching is a physical activity. It's all about bodies. It's how we interact with the learners. It's about the physical presence of the teacher and the physical presence of the learners. So how can this work online? It's impossible. And what was really surprising to me was that, in fact, teaching online became possible. In most of the activities and a lot of the activities in course books, for example, worked quite well online. And some activities worked even better online. And that was a shock to me, because I thought, well, the presence of the teacher and the presence of the learner is important. So what is the difference? I mean, obviously, teaching face-to-face and teaching online is different. And I wanted to explore what is the effect of the physical presence of the teacher and the learners. And that's kind of what got me thinking about the embodied presence of the teacher. I mean, there are some things that you can't do online. For example, action songs. And action songs are a traditional way of learning a language. When we're babies or very young children, our parents will sing songs to us, and there will be actions. And these will be remembered throughout our life. I mean, I'm sure you all remember your mother and your father singing songs with actions. And it's something about the words and the actions and the rhythms that make these songs memorable, and you remember them until you have your own children, and then you use the same songs and sing to them. So this is how we're exposed to language initially, and this doesn't work well online. If you try to get everybody singing a song online, it's complete chaos. But most other activities actually work quite well online. So I started thinking about, well, what is teaching and learning? Is teaching primarily about giving knowledge? Or is it more about helping learners to learn? And what is learning? Is learning primarily about knowing something, or is it about doing something? And maybe you'd like to put your response in the chat. What do you think? Is it giving knowledge or helping learners to learn? Is it more about knowing something, or is it about doing something? Obviously, it's a combination, essentially. But I've always thought that it's the actual doing that was important in my teaching. And then I realized that actually there are different kinds of teachers. There are the teachers who believe in A, and there are the teachers who believe in B. And for some reason, my screen is not moving. Okay. So, yeah, in my observations, at one end of the scale, there are teachers who believe that learning is about transmitting knowledge. And the other end of the scale, it's about facilitating learning. Okay. So the teachers who believe that knowledge is about transmitting information, generally they build their lessons on the materials and the procedure. They believe that learning involves going through the course book, going through the units, what have we covered. Lessons tend to be quite teacher-centered. There is a focus on accuracy and grammar, and very often assessment is with tests. And lessons can become quite routine and quite scripted. They can follow the same lesson with different year after year. There are other teachers at the other extreme who believe that teachers are facilitators of discovery, and that teaching is much more about performance. It's much more about what you do in the classroom. So lessons are built on contexts and personalized. And learning is more about using the language to do things. Lessons tend to be more learner-centered, and the focus is on communicating and using the language. And it's a kind of a risk for the teacher, because you don't really know what's going to happen. You don't know how the learners are going to perform. So it's a bit more open-ended. And both of these kind of teachers exist, and most teachers are probably in the middle somewhere. But I think the teachers who work very effectively online are the ones who are the transmitters of information, because it works well. I mean, what we're doing now is me transmitting information, essentially, and you listening, which is not the kind of teaching environment that I feel is the most appropriate very often, particularly in terms of language learning, because I don't think knowing about the anatomy of our legs helps us to walk. What helps us to walk is walking. So basically, it comes back to identity. And this is a preoccupation with teacher educators, is if we want to change teachers' behavior and their beliefs and their attitudes and their emotions, we have to think about identity. And we have to think about questions like, why are we here? That's not a philosophical question in terms of why do human beings exist, but why are we here? Why are we in this Zoom room now at this time in February? What is our life story? What has brought us to this moment? Why are you listening to me? Why are you a teacher? And these are important questions that we need to reflect on. Why are you a teacher, and what kind of teacher are you? And I don't think teacher training courses or teacher education courses focus on these questions enough, or at all, in fact. And that's partly, I think, because we don't have, as teacher trainers, we often don't have the methodology or the strategies to kind of address some of these questions. A number of activities, drama activities that I've used in teacher training, and they don't work online really, but we're going to try to do one if we can. And this is a transformation activity. I'm going to turn on my video, but no, I won't, just in case we lose connection. But you just have to imagine my face online. So this is a transformation activity. And when I say transformation activity to teachers, they all say, oh, yes, yes, present tense to past tense, or active to passive voice, or direct speech to reported speech. And I say, no, 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 it's not that kind of transformation. What we're going to do is we're going to transform ourselves. We're going to transform ourselves into an animal. And it's a bird. It has large eyes. It can turn its head right round. What animal is it? If you know, you can put it in the chat. Yes. So it's an owl. And we're going to transform into an owl. So what you need to do is you need to breathe in through your nose. Look to your right, and then as you breathe out, make the hooting sound of an owl. So it'll be a ooh. So breathe in, turn to your right, 1, 2, 3, breathe out, ooh, and make the sound of an owl. And when I do this on teacher training courses, then I ask the teachers, okay, how did you feel? How did you feel imagining you were an owl? And most of them say, oh, I felt a bit self-conscious. I didn't really know why I was doing it. Seems a bit stupid on a teacher training course. Why are we doing this? And I said, okay, so what we were doing is we were using our imagination. We were imagining that we were an owl. Now, as adults, that is difficult. But as children, it's what we do all the time. Children imagine that they are train drivers, Lionel Messi, princess, actor, king, queen, and they play in using roles. And this is how children learn. But when we get to a kind of age of maturity, teenager, our ego becomes more established, our identity becomes more established, and we actually find it very difficult to use our imagination and to imagine different scenarios. And we become much more self-conscious. And that makes it hard for us to play. So one thing I thought, with these drama activities, I've used drama activities with teachers often, and I've asked the teachers, okay, what did you practice using these activities? What skills did you practice? And how did you feel about them? And are they useful skills for teachers? And I've kind of built up a list, but basically they can be grouped into 3 areas. So activities or skills that make us more aware of ourselves. So how to use our senses, our listening, our feeling, how to be more aware of other people, how they are feeling, how the group operates, how we interact, and also how aware we are of other people and our context and our situation. And the atmosphere in the classroom, who is feeling positive, who is feeling negative. And I've made a list of these, what I call performative skills. And here they are. So to raise energy levels, or to raise awareness of our senses, to develop group cooperation, to be more aware of atmosphere in the classroom. And then activities that make us more aware of ourselves. So what is our journey? What is our self-identity? But none of these are actually practiced in a teacher education context. So what I did last year is I did an MA in applied theatre. And the reason I did that was to see how applied theatre could inform or influence or help teacher education. Because I think that teaching demands skills that are more pertinent to artists than to scientists. And the reason I think this is because teaching is based on judgments that happen in real time. So when we walk into the classroom, we don't really know what's going to happen or how the learners are going to behave. So we have to improvise. We have to change our behavior depending on what happens in real time. And it's unpredictable. And it's kind of risky for a teacher, but it's also what makes teaching what it is. It makes it exciting. And it's emotional. We have to interact with the learners' emotions and be physically present for them. And what happens in the classroom, the achievements of the classroom, are emergent in the lesson. We don't really know how well the learning is going to go, and then we have to respond to how it happens. And teacher education or teacher training doesn't prepare us for this, really. Very often in training courses, we're given formula that help us plan lessons or give instructions, etc. So what I wanted to see was, did applied theatre have any methodology, any techniques that could help teachers? Because applied theatre is used in many, many contexts for developmental purposes. It's used in hospitals, it's used in prisons for rehabilitation, it's used in community centres, it's used in many training situations. And I was interested in learning the methodology. How do they do it? And what I discovered was 2 people. Paulo Freire, who is actually a Brazilian pedagogue and not unfamiliar to teachers, and Augusto Boal, who was actually a student of Freire. who took his methods and exploited or utilized them in as a dramatist. And their philosophy, which makes a lot of sense, was that in order to learn anything, you have to start with an awareness of yourself and your identity, who you are, and also your context. What are the challenges? What are the difficulties? What is your situation? And then once you've established an awareness of yourself, then you can start to find solutions, think of solutions. And these solutions need to promote change. And Boal in particular developed a methodology which he calls forum theatre. And forum, basically, the principle is very simple. You start with thinking about your challenges, your difficulties. What are some of the challenges that you face? And then you tell these to a group of people, and then the group will reenact the scenarios and then present them to another group, and the groups will find solutions. And this kind of was very appealing to me because it is focused on real issues. It's focused on real problems that teachers face. And also it's solution oriented. It's finding solutions to real problems. And I don't think teacher training finds solutions to real problems. It kind of shows the solutions, but without really addressing the problems. And the other thing about forum theatre was that it provides a space for reflection and discussion. And teacher training is all about, or teacher education is all about reflection and discussion. If you go to any teacher training book or book on teacher education, it says that in order to develop as a teacher, you need to reflect on what you're doing and discuss it and talk about it. The other feature that is useful, I think, is the idea that you take problems, you take issues, but you fictionalize them. So you create a drama to reenact it. And this provides a distance. So instead of kind of saying, okay, I have this real problem in my classroom, and explaining the problem as a teacher, that's kind of quite emotional and it's quite difficult to do. But if you reenact it as a group, in which case it's no longer your problem, but it's the group problem, then it kind of provides a distance and you're able to talk about it much more objectively and without that emotion of, oh, I'm a bad teacher, I've done something wrong, I can't solve my own problems. But the key thing about it is it's participant-centered. So all the materials are generated by the participants, the teachers, and it's finding solutions and it's encouraging dialogue. So I found lots of useful, the methodology and the principles seem to work well for teachers in terms of teacher development. So what I did this with a group of teachers in Istanbul. And the first thing I did is I said, okay, think about the problems that you face. Think about the challenges of your job. What are the main difficulties? If you could solve something in your life, in your teaching profession, what would it be? And maybe if you have a difficulty or a challenge that you think teachers face or that you face in your institution, maybe you could put it into the chat box. When I did this in Istanbul, we came up with a long list of difficulties and challenges that teachers face, as you can imagine. this was the question I asked. What are the main challenges, problems, difficulties you have as a teacher? And this is the results we got. Quite a few of the problems were internal problems. And I can see in the chat that you can empathize with these problems. And I think all teachers kind of face these difficulties at some stage in their career, or perhaps throughout their career. Self-doubt. I'm not good enough. I'm not a native speaker. I don't know enough. I'm not qualified enough. My English is not good enough. I feel like I am an imposter in the classroom. And these self-doubts are normal. Lack of knowledge. I'm worried that my lessons will go pear-shaped. They'll go wrong. I'm not doing it the right way. A lot of issues, a lot of problems in the workshop that they wrote about were to do with the content. In fact, this was the biggest challenge. The regulations are not realistic. I'm stuck. I can't change anything. My situation is fixed. There's too much control. I'm a robot. Classes are too large. The workload is too heavy. This was a big one. I don't have time. I have no time to develop as a teacher. My workload is too much. I have too many other responsibilities, duty times, other things I have to do. I'm not paid enough. I'm not appreciated enough. Also, this was just after the pandemic, so working at home was a problem. But a lot of the problems faced by teachers seem to be, in their eyes, out of their control. It was to do with the context. The other group was external, other people, basically. So I have problems with colleagues. They are toxic. I have problems with negativity from other people, problems with parents, problems with learners, problems with management, problems with administration. Other people cause me problems. None of these issues, I don't think, are really addressed in a teacher training or teacher education context. But these are real problems that teachers face. So the next stage was, having brainstormed problems that teachers face, is we personalized it. So we said, okay, think of a problem that you face, a current difficulty, either something that you have faced in the past or something that you are currently faced with. Now, obviously, we're not dealing with therapy here, so we don't want people to talk about problems they have with their marriage or their relationships, but professionally, we want to think about problems that you have as a teacher that you are facing. And obviously that's going to affect their private life and their home life as well. But this methodology is a way of addressing that. So we got people to think about a problem, either that they have faced or they're currently facing. And we said, okay, focus on this problem. And when you think about this problem, what emotion do you feel? Try to feel the emotion. So the participants sat there quietly and they thought about their problems or put the particular problems, and they thought about an emotion. And as they were doing this, we said, okay, now can you try to make an image of the emotion? So basically make a picture of how you stand, how you look, a frozen picture, like a photograph, when you feel this emotion. And also think about a sound. So they thought about how this emotion affected their body and what sound it generated. And then we were able to group people according to the kind of emotions that they were expressing. I mean, obviously, some people were angry, some people were sad, some people, I mean, there's a whole range of emotions, exasperated, frustrated. And then in the groups, the idea was that they would share their problems, share their difficulties, share their stories. And then as a group, they would tell the story, but just using pictures, just using still images. And this was effective because the person whose story it was could act as the director and not actually be in the story itself. So somebody else would take their role in the story. And this provided a distance. And then groups showed their stories to each other, and we were able to discuss them and think of solutions. And this is essentially what the methodology consists of. And it's very simple. I mean, it's just 3 stages. First stage is brainstorming problems and issues and thinking about real problems that you face in your profession. The second stage is reenacting these, and there are different techniques for doing it. It's not about acting, it's about telling. So it's telling a story using pictures. And this is useful because it kind of distances the participants from the problem. It's no longer their problem, but a story, a problem being told in a fiction. And then the final stage is to show the problems to an audience, and then get the audience to discuss them, reflect on them, and find solutions. And this is how the methodology works. And I was interested in this because I think it's very appropriate for teacher training and for teacher education. And it's not complicated. So we did this and we presented it to an audience, and we found that the methodology was very effective, that the audience got very involved in the problems and they wanted to help us find solutions, and they came forward and they reenacted the scenario. I mean, they joined in the scenarios in order to reenact them and find solutions. So what I discovered from my MA in applied theatre was 3 things, I think, that are useful for teacher education and teacher development. The first one is that we need to focus on performative skills. What teachers do in the classroom, the behavior of the learners, the interaction between the teacher and the learners. And I don't think this is focused on enough. Teachers are very familiar with cognitive skills and metacognitive skills, how to think and how to help learners think. There's a lot of focus on critical thinking. There's too much thinking, I think, in the language classroom. We should be focusing much more on doing, how to perform, how to interact, how to develop group work, how to interact with each other, how to listen, how to speak. And these are performative skills that are largely ignored in teacher training and teacher education. partly, I think, because a lot of teacher educators are academics, and they believe that teaching is about competence. It's about essentially procedure, static formula, which of course, as teachers, we know that that's not right. In fact, in learning, in the classroom, we know that it has to be learner-centered, it has to be communicative, learners need to practice. But in teacher training context and teacher education context, very often it becomes much more about knowledge and transmitting knowledge. So that's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned was the methodology, that applied theatre methodology is appropriate and can work for teachers in teacher training contexts. We can take real problems and interrogate those real problems and find solutions using applied theatre methodology. So it's not there's a distance between the fiction and the reality of the real problems. And this provides a methodology to actually find solutions and reflect on who we are as teachers and why we teach in the way we do. And that's the third thing I learned, which is perhaps the most surprising, is that very often there are techniques, there are activities that help personal reflection, reflection on our identity, reflection on who we are, why we are the people that we are, and why we behave in the way that we do. And very often it's drama activities that can bring this reflection to the front, if you like. So that's what I discovered from my MA in Applied Theatre. This is a link to a video which I'm not sure will work, to be honest, because the sound may not. Shall I click on it and see what happens? Is that, can you hear the video or not?
I'm afraid not.
No, okay, I'll leave it. You can watch it. Yeah, you can watch. I'll send the link and I'll do it another time. Okay. That's kind of what I wanted to say. I mean, the next steps for me, I think, is to think about how applied theatre, how drama can be utilized into teacher education. But I would encourage teachers, if you're involved in teacher development or teacher workshops or training contexts, to experiment with talking about problems that are real problems. Don't, very often teacher development sessions, workshops, seminars focus on what the trainer wants to talk about, as opposed to what the real problems that teachers are facing. So there are methods that you can do that actually enable teachers to bring up issues that are challenges, difficulties that they are facing in a way that you don't lose face, that don't become too emotional. And there is a methodology that can help with this. And I think it's worth pursuing. I'm certainly going to pursue it with workshops and get people trained in some of these methods to develop facilitation skills that allow people to disclose their own personal feelings, emotions, issues, challenges, because very often teachers have problems, but it's very difficult to express them, because somehow you feel that you're not good enough or lacking in knowledge. And that's what teacher development and teacher education should be all about: supporting teachers, inexperienced teachers and experienced teachers, to find solutions to these real issues. So that's what I want to say.